So what happens when an OBGYN, a doctor who deals with pregnancy literally every single day, gets a test result that's so confusing it makes her question everything? We're going to dive into the chaotic, emotional, and surprisingly scientific journey of one doctor staring at that little plastic stick that, well, was about to change everything. And it all started with this exact thought. Yep, this is that moment of pure disbelief that kicked off a whole investigation, led by the very person who thought she'd seen it all, Dr. Marta Bjorkman. Okay, so let's set the scene here. Dr. Bjorkman is still breastfeeding her third child, which means her cycle is, as she puts it, super weird. So before heading out to have a drink with a friend, she decides to do the responsible thing. Take a quick pregnancy test, just to be safe. And bam, there it was. Not some clear, bold yes, but this faint, kind of shadowy second line. It was just enough to be there, but also just enough to make her wonder if her eyes were playing tricks on her. You know that classic is it or isn't it moment? Yeah, it was that.
But this is where the story gets really interesting. After that initial morning confusion, Dr. Bjorkman, being a scientist, decided she needed more data. So, just a few hours later, she took another test.
And this one? A very clear, very digital, not pregnant. Okay, so one test says yes, the other says no. What is going on? Was the first one just a fluke, or is something else at play? This is where her doctor brain really kicked into high gear. To solve this mystery, you kind of have to understand the science here. It all comes down to this hormone called HCG. It's what the tests are looking for in your urine. Now, in early pregnancy, the HCG levels start out super low, and then they basically double every couple of days. But here's the key. Not all tests are created equal. And this really gets to the heart of the whole thing. Her morning test, that first response one, is incredibly sensitive. It can pick up even tiny amounts of HCG, especially with that concentrated first thing in the morning pee. But the lunchtime test, the clear blue digital, it's way less sensitive. It needs a much higher level of HCG to actually show that pregnant result. Add in the fact that she'd been drinking coffee and water all morning, and you have the perfect recipe for a false negative. So with one faint positive and one really clear negative, what's an OBGYN supposed to do? Well, after a full day of doing surgery, she decided she needed a tiebreaker. But that led to its own little adventure. Getting a clear answer was not going to be easy. So first, she checks her stash at home, only to realize all her tests are expired. Of course. So her mission for certainty meant she had to brave a literal blizzard just to get to Walgreens. This wasn't just a quick errand. This was a full-on quest for the truth, against the elements and everything.
And that quest for certainty? It came with a $30 price tag for 2 brand new, non-expired, and, hopefully, definitive tests. All of that just to answer the one question that had been hanging over her entire day.
All right, so she's finally back home from the hospital, armed with 2 new tests. The moment of truth has arrived. No more faint lines, no more conflicting digital screens. It was time for a final, conclusive answer. And there it was, unmistakable. 2 new tests, and both of them were clearly, screamingly positive. The scientific mystery was solved. The roller coaster of a day had finally come to a stop. The answer was clear. Now, she just had to tell her husband. And his reaction? Pure disbelief. And you have to remember, her husband is a board-certified pediatrician. I mean, these 2 people literally know everything about how this happens, and yet his very first response was just shock. It's a perfect reminder that no matter amount of medical school can really prepare you for this kind of personal news. You can really feel the emotional whiplash of that day, right? It starts with total confusion in the morning, then shifts into serious doubt by lunchtime, and finally lands on solid confirmation in the evening. Just a whole spectrum of emotions, all packed into about 12 hours. And of course, with that confirmation came a flood of new realities. The abstract idea of maybe was suddenly the very concrete fact of baby number 4 is on the way. And that meant some big changes were on the horizon.
I mean, they had talked about it, sure, but this happened way sooner than they expected. With their third kid only being about a year old, the idea of adding a 4th meant their already busy life was about to get, as they put it, wild. And maybe most importantly, they realized they're going to need a bigger van.
But this surprise also sparked a really fantastic idea. As 2 doctors navigating a 4th pregnancy, they decided, hey, let's document this whole journey week by week. They're going to share their personal experience right alongside their professional expertise.
And this isn't just about sharing their own story. They're planning to turn this whole journey into a resource, building a real community for other expecting parents who are navigating the same beautiful, messy, wonderful chaos.
So how's she feeling right now? Well, the fatigue has already hit hard. And while there's no real nausea just yet, she is noticing more blemishes, which is funny because of that old wives' tale that having a girl steals your beauty. There's no science to that, of course, but it's a fun thing to notice this early on. And to build that community, they're going to keep sharing free stuff on YouTube, but they're also launching a membership, TDB Plus, for more in-depth guides and resources. The whole goal is to create this really supportive space for anyone going through the journey of pregnancy and early parenting.
In the end, this whole story, from the faint line to the blizzard to the final answer, is just such a powerful lesson. If an OBGYN and a pediatrician can have their entire world completely and wonderfully flipped upside down by a $30 test, what does that tell you? It just goes to show, no matter how much you plan, no matter how much you think you know, life's greatest adventures are so often the ones you never ever see coming.